Welcome to the last class of Raj Yoga, Pranam Mantra. Om Namah Shri Yatirajaya Vivekananda Suray Sachit Sukha Swarupaya Swami Tapaharine. So, as I said, welcome to the last talk. This is about freedom. Just to recollect all that we have been doing in Raj Yoga, I'm sure you remember that the Raj Yoga talk began with the ultimate of Raj Yoga, Chitta Vritti Nirodha. All the mental thoughts that we have, all the waves that are rising in our minds, they need to be subdued completely, thoroughly, finally. And if you can do it, you know what you are. That famous question that our Ramana Maharshi used to say, who am I? Then you know that you are infinite, ever present, ever happy. No misery can touch you. And this universe is just like a speck of dust in front of you. You have all knowledge, you have all strength. You don't want to interfere in the affairs of the world. That's a very popular question that non-believers tend to ask religious persons, that if religion is true, if you have all these powers, why don't you interfere? Why don't you do good to the world? The problem is, as you start growing up, you realize that whatever is going on in this world, just like puppies play, it's nothing. Those of you who have some knowledge about martial arts, you know that as you grow in powers, say judo, karate, or whatever it be, you also acquire power to restrain yourself. It's not that simply because you know the art, you know the technique, you start applying it everywhere. No, you don't. This desire to do good to the world is only when you are identified with this world. When you go completely outside this, we know what's the truth. Then you don't want to do good to the world. You know that there's a natural process. It's like some abscess has formed on your body. You go to the doctor says, just wait, let it mature. We all have that kind of abscess in our head. It needs to get mature. And then comes the guru, then comes the teacher. Performs surgical operation, and then you are out of it. After that begins your spiritual journey. But Raj Yoga is not a philosophy of bhakti. It discussed in detail what is mind, what is the nature of mind, how the creation comes, and what is creation, and how you can handle your mind. More importantly, if you have decided to take up this path of yoga, how you should be interacting with the world. It famously says, Maitri Karuna Mudita Upeksha. If you talk about sadhana apart from the meditation and asana, see, if you simplify Raj Yoga, you can say that it talks about yam, niyam, asana, pranayam, pratyahar, dharana, dhyan, samadhi, the 8 steps. Most important of all this is number 1 is yam and niyam, certain practices, values and virtues, and then there is meditation. Patanjali doesn't talk much about how to meditate. Simply says that stay focused on your Ishta. Finished. When it comes to world, simply says Maitri, Karuna, Mudita, Upeksha. It's one of the very good discussions we had. And is there, those of you who have not listened to that talk can listen. It's very important. How to interact with the world. He says four tricks are the four reactions that you should have: friendliness towards all or whatever is good, compassion wherever there is misery, and be happy if someone is doing something good. If you find someone is doing bad, ignore. So, once you start practicing values, get established in virtues like tapasya, and then go for meditation, withdraw yourself from the world in the sense that you should have only good feelings towards all, and the rest goes on and on. Whole of yoga is basically elaboration of what exactly goes on, which we discussed in detail. And then came this last section. Previous two discussions were on mind and how Patanjali handles Buddhistic schools of thought. But let me remind you that every system of philosophy has its strength and has its chinks. Whenever there is argument, one system attacks the chinks and tries to cover its own chinks. Uh, every philosophy has its weakness. You cannot say that this philosophy is perfect and that philosophy is full of loopholes. No. So that in brief, that's what we discussed. If you want to remember what is yoga about, first is about complete control of mental waves. Number two, practice values, get established in virtues, and meditate. Finished. Rest will follow on its own. That's now today being the last talk, we were talking about nature of freedom, how freedom is acquired, etc. In the previous talk, we had this. The essence of knowledge, this was Sutra number 21. The essence of knowledge, that is Purusa, is unchangeable. It never changes. So when the mind takes its form, it becomes conscious. Now see, other systems of philosophy will like to argue. The sages have seen this, they have experienced this. There's not much to argue. Now, Patanjali is not really the founder of yoga school. He's just the chronicler. He is just a link in that huge series of teachers of yoga. And he is narrating what the masters had experienced. So anyway, now in Sutra number 22, mind is defined as the junction between pure consciousness, Purusha, and a variety of this universe. Drashtri drishyoparaktam chittam sarvartham. Colored by the seer and the seen, the mind is able to understand everything. Regarding mind, just to remind you, because see, these are deep philosophies, not very simple to understand. Mind is finest form of matter. When the light of Purusha is on it, that is, light of consciousness is there. So from one side you have the light of consciousness, and from the other side you have pictures coming from the universe, from the world, through the senses. And these get joined. Once they get joined, play of life begins. It's something like, if we can use a very crude example, those of you who have seen the old time movie projectors, old time. Nowadays, we don't use projectors, I think. The system has become entirely different. In a projector, there used to be light. In front of that light, there would be a reel, dead reel. And there used to be lenses and other instruments. And once the movie was switched on, the light coming from behind, that would enlarge those pictures falling on a screen. And everything was kind of united there. And everything was united in such a way that the pictures, they seem to be talking. The pictures, they seem to be moving. And someone who was watching it would kind of get identified with that. Combination of this light and the cinema reel. The universe is like that cinema reel. It's practically dead. Dead pictures, if you might have seen those sections of cinema reels. Nothing. They're just some pictures, slightly different, slightly different. The pictures move. It gives the feeling of things moving and things talking, etc. Colored by the seer in the scene, the mind is able to understand everything. That's the beauty of mind. On the one hand, it has Purusha, pure consciousness, and on the other, it has the universe. Mind can understand everything. There's a very special state of existence. Sri Ramakrishna used to call it Bhavamukh. When you do not really identified with the world, nor you are identified with Atman. See, normally either you are identified with the world, the objects, or you are identified with God. There is a very special state for the spiritual masters, spiritual teachers, where they kind of stay at that state where they are conscious of the light of Purusha, and they are also conscious of the variety of the world. This is Bhavamukh. Sri Ramakrishna say Bhavamukh. The spot, the point from where everything emanates, from where everything comes out. In fact, every prophet, he can teach only if he stays in Bhavamukha, because if he merges too much in that light, he won't care about the world. And if he is too much in the world, he will forget the light. So we are those who are involved in the world. We know about God, we know about soul, we talk about Atman, we preach about Atman. They are all hollow things. Unless you have realized that, unless you have reached that state where you see that these two things are getting joined, discussions are all meaningless. So, Sutra number 22 explains the relationship between the world and Purusha, consciousness. Mind is the meeting ground. Mind will always be the meeting ground. There's no way that it cannot be a meeting ground. Always, it has to be. It is in the nature. It is in the nature of the mind to bring Purusha and Prakriti together. Prakriti is this universe and Purush, pure consciousness. Mind is the platform where these two get wedded. This we have discussed earlier. Tat sankhyeya vasana chitram parartham sanghati akaritvat. The mind, though variegated by innumerable desires, acts for another, the Purusha, because it acts in combination. Patanjali gives another argument that see, mind has innumerable desires, and mind is a compound. On the one hand, mind is a compound, and it has many desires. It wants this, it wants that. That shows that it works for someone else. This is a very common argument used in every system of Indian philosophy where they say that wherever you see a compound, know that it works for something simpler or it is meant for the use of someone else. So, for example, there is a house. House is a compound. There are so many things involved together. There has to be a mind that will combine all the variety of things to make a complete picture, to make a complete whole. And it is meant for the use of someone who is beyond that compound. Now, mind being compound, it has to be meant for the use of someone else, someone who is not mind. And as we have seen, everything is in the mind. So everything that we know in this universe cannot be the master of the mind. It has to be something outside that mind. Patanjali says Purusha is that. So it's basically a very simple argument, and as I told you that this argument is used in every system of philosophy. So mind is a junction where you have Purusha and where you have Prakriti coming. So naturally, master of mind it has to be someone else. Vishesh darshan atma bhavana nivriti. For the discriminating, now comes the discussion on someone who has done sadhana throughout her life or his life and has become truly discriminating. The neti of Vedanta is that you discriminate. Only that Patanjali's yoga is the practical science of liberation, practical science of mukti. Neti does the same, just that yoga explains that. Bhavana nivratihi. You're the discriminating. You have learned to discriminate. You say that anything that belongs to Prakriti, anything that belongs to the realm of mind, I don't want. So it says, this sutra says, for the discriminating, the perception of the mind as Atman ceases. This sutra number 24 is very important for those who are interested in the study of consciousness. The Western world, they talk so much about consciousness. We mentioned many times that they will never be able to understand consciousness because they don't have any idea about what consciousness is. In the beginning, when we were discussing mind, there we had discussed the problem of consciousness. And later also, once or twice, we had this discussion that is mind conscious? Mind is not conscious. Many arguments were used. And let's not get into all those arguments. The most important thing is to the discriminating. If you do yoga practices and if you reach that level, the highest level, then you realize that mind is the meeting point of the meeting ground of Purush and Prakriti. Then you know it. Those of you who are really interested in knowing how mind and consciousness are different, I'll suggest you to listen to the talk on mind, which is, I think, number 2 or number 3 talk. I don't remember. So the most important argument that mind is not Atman, mind is not Purusha, mind is not soul, mind is not consciousness, that you will see it for yourself. Provided you have gone through these rigors of yoga and you have learned how to discriminate. Tada Vivekanimnam Kaivalya Praga Bhavam Chittam. Now, once you have known the truth about something, will you be holding on to the wrong thing? To give you a very crude example again, because we are studying such deep things that examples that come have to be very crude. You want some some gold ornaments. You go to a shop, and the shop owner tells you that we sell only fakes. This is not real gold. You will say, thank you. Get out of that shop. Now, in future also, when you need something gold, you will not be entering that shop. You know that it sells only rolled gold. You want freedom. You want to be established in your true nature. And you have known that mind is not that. Naturally, you like to get out of it. It's a very natural thing. See, many of you are very serious listener of these talks, and I have highest regard for you people. But let me tell you one thing, that nowadays with Vedanta being very popular and desire to be free has become kind of a truism for spiritual seekers. Everyone talks on those lines. But unless you know that you don't want this world, the problem is whenever we are in some kind of pain, whenever we are in some kind of trouble, we say that we don't want it anymore. Sri Ramakrishna used to say something very interesting, that whenever a married woman or woman has labor pains about to give birth to a child, she screams that she will not visit her husband ever again, or in modern language, partner. But she goes again. Whenever we are in pain, we say that we will never again go near that object that caused me pain. But once that pain is over, we go to that. The desire for mukti, the real desire for mukti, comes only when you have known the nature of it. Once you know the true nature, because we hope that things will change. But if we know for real that, once you know that flame is not flower. Those of you who might have read Rudyard Kipling's Jungle Book, there the animals talk fire as red flower. Once you know that it's not flower, you'll touch it very carefully. So, says that bent on discriminating the mind attains the previous state of, first was perception of the mind as Atman Sija, and then bent on discriminating. Tada Vivek Nimnam Kaivalya Pragabhavam Chittam. Bent on discriminating the mind attains the previous state of Kaivalya, freedom. isolation. So yoga actually leads you to discrimination. This is a very important philosophical point that we all need to understand. Any spiritual practice, any spiritual, whether you are a Buddhist or you are a Jain or you are a Hindu, no spiritual practice can ever lead you to spiritual realization. This is a misnomer that most people have. People think that through bhakti you can attain God. No, 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 you cannot. Spiritual practices only create the ground. Yoga creates the ground through discrimination and says that it gives you such discriminating power that you can throw away the mind too. Even the mind can be thrown away. Such power. Think of a pole vault jumper. Makes use of the pole, makes a huge jump to scale a wall or to scale an obstruction. In the last moment, he lets go of the pole. You let go of the mind. It requires tremendous amount of discriminatory power. Those of you who might have read the book Lord of the Rings or watched the movie, you'll find that that ring had to be thrown where it had originated. But when the time came, that boy, he refused to part with it. Simply refused. He had been holding on to it or holding it for so long that it was not possible for him to give it up. So Swamiji says, we find that nature is a compound and is showing the panorama for the Purusha who is witness. You are watching the movie, sitting in the cinema hall. It's a panorama, just panorama. Whatever we are watching, these are all simply panorama. That nature is not the Lord, because all the combinations are for someone else. When discrimination comes by long practice, fear ceases and the mind attains liberation. You take help of the mind to burn down the mind. Now, if there is no mind, there will be no seeing, there will be no experiences. Tat chidresu pratyay antarani sanskarebhyah. The thoughts that arise as obstructions to that are from impressions. Now, here I'll say, I hope you don't mind, I shouldn't be, I feel very embarrassed talking. Those of you who might have read Tia, Tia is a very interesting book because there, the last chapter where Tia gets the freedom, those of you who might have read will understand this, that every chapter is about experience and Tia is moving from experience to experience towards freedom. And towards the end, it starts getting those mental impressions as external realities. Tat chidresu pratyay antarani sanskarebhyah. The thoughts now arise as obstructions. This is known as Yog Vigna. This is the famous last temptation of Christ. If you read the biographies of these great masters, each of these great masters had the last temptation. Mar appeared before Lord Buddha. Sri Ramakrishna said that he was tempted many times differently through this and that. You have to know that these are mere thoughts. These are no more the realities from the external world. So from the external world, you have moved completely to the inner world. One of my very good friends is a very learned person and he has read Tia more than 15, 16 times. And he says that, look, he understands Tia completely, but he says the land of eternity he is not able to understand. I told him that you will never understand unless you get into spirituality. Well, this is known as Dagd Bij. When these things have come, you destroy them too. You say, no more. These are the last temptations. Till then, everything was coming as object. Now the thoughts will appear as objects. Hanamesham klesh vaduktam. Now their destruction of these thoughts is in the same way as it was in Prati Prasava. When we were discussing klesh, avidya, smita, raga, dvesh, avinivesh, there it was discussed that these things need to be resolved in their causal states. We have discussed in detail. All these things, kleshas, they have evolved one after another. From avidya has come asmita, from asmita comes attachment, from attachment comes aversion and clinging on to life. They need to be resolved back. Just like that, these thoughts, we are at the last stage of prati prasav, resolving the effect into the cause. And now, the seeds have been burned down completely. Completely burned down. And then, a very special kind of samadhi ensues. All the kind of samadhi that we have known, this one is completely different from that. Prasankhyaane api akusidasya sarvata viveka khyate dharma megha samadhi. This is samadhi known as dharma megha. There is a perfect discrimination now. You have given up even the seeds. Now comes very special kind of samadhi known as dharma megha samadhi, and that is when you know who you are, what your purpose in life is. So these two things, this viveka khyati, when you know the truth about mind, truth about Purusha, really you know, then comes pushing back. You as if push Ganga from Ganga Sagar, that is Kolkata, back to Gangotri. You push back. So this Prati Prasav, pushing back, is of two kinds. One is when you have pushed the klesh, avidya, asmita, and second is when this idea that mind is Purusha, that is given up. This is true knowledge. Viveka khyati. Discriminatory. This is a true discriminatory knowledge. In dharma megha samadhi, what happens? It is beyond virtue and vice. This is pure knowledge, where there is neither virtue nor vice. And then you realize that everything flows out from there. Swamiji says that is cloud of virtue. It's pure knowledge. All the great prophets of the world, whom history has recorded at this, they had found the whole foundation of knowledge within themselves. Truth of them had become real. Those of you who have studied Swami Vivekananda's biography very minutely would remember when Swami Vivekananda was roaming around the country. Once he was at Dwarka. This is my favorite example. This is my understanding. Or you can say when he was at Kanyakumari. But definitely at Dwarka itself, he was sitting and then he suddenly found that a light, extremely shining light arose. And then he knew that, oh, India will arise again. And those were the days when India was in such a bad shape. Not only poverty and ignorance and disease. Suddenly he had that knowledge. Or maybe at Kanyakumari, at that rock where he was meditating. And he had this dharma megha samadhi. When everything became clear to him. Everything. Past, present, future. Or maybe at Dwarka it was only about India. At Kanyakumari it was the entire thing. Whole picture became clear. So if you read just these two chapters, Dwarka and Kanyakumari of Swami Vivekananda, you will be able to understand these sutras. Tata klesha karma nivriti. Once you have dharma make samadhi, you become completely free. Then all these small things like avidya, smita, raga, dvesha, the five klesha, they will not trouble you anymore. They are gone, gone forever. And there is no way you can fall from that state. Whatever religious practices you might be in, there's the possibility of falling down from where you have reached is always there. You can go higher up in the sky, but you will fall down. But once you have escaped gravity, you will not fall down anymore. And for that, you also need escape velocity. Mind has its field. The field, to the extent it affects, it attracts. Once you are outside it, it cannot pull you back, just like gravitational field. In one of our earlier talks, I had explained how mind is another field. Mind is just another field, just like gravity and electricity and magnetism. And I'm sure, I have no proof, I'm sure that it follows inverse square law. Nearer attracts, as they say, out of sight, out of mind. You go far away, attraction diminishes. Unlike gravity, mind does not attract all. Unlike magnetism and electricity, it doesn't repel the similar. It's the other way around. It attracts the similar, repels the dissimilar. If you are good, you will attract only good people. If you are bad, you will attract only bad people. If you are mischievous, you will attract mischievous people. Because mind attracts similar minds. Now, once you have crossed that sphere, you have reached Dharma makes samadhi. Now you cannot fall. No more pains for you. You know what's the truth, as Swamiji explained. Peace and calmness and perfect purity became their own nature. That's when you say that I am the Son of God. That's when you say I am the Prophet of God. Or that I am a messenger of God. Of course, you will not say you are God because that's meant for only incarnations. That's not meant for sadhaka, avatar, like Sri Ram and Sri Krishna and Sri Ramakrishna. They will not, they don't have all this. They're different. They are always established in knowledge. Tada sarva avaranam alapetasya jnanasya anantyaj geyam alpam. So the knowledge bereft of all covering impurities becomes infinite. Our knowledge is always limited, finite, because knowledge is limited. But in that state, your knowledge becomes unlimited because all the coverings have been removed. To limit means to cover. To cover means to limit. Once all the coverings have gone, it will only mean that it's all unlimited. It's unlimited, unlimited. Knowledge itself is there. Knowledge is always there. Knowledge is always there. Just that it's covered. This pen is there. This pen is a covering on pure existence. Its very presence is covering pure existence. Once this covering goes away, then you realize it's not pen, it's pure existence. Once Sri Ramakrishna had gone to Kolkata, and he was with Hridayaram, his nephew from sister side. And they were crossing Raj Bhavan, governor's house. And Hridayaram, excited as he was a worldly person, he says, Mama, oh Mama, uncle, see, this is governor's house in those Raj Bhavan. Sri Ramakrishna said, I only see heap of brick and mud. Ultimately, what is a governor's house? Just brick and mud. Finished. The reality of the true knowledge of it is covered. For a yogi who is established in the state, it's gone. Swamiji mentions, one of the Buddhistic scriptures defines what's meant by the Buddha, which is the name of a state, as infinite knowledge. What is Buddha? Infinite knowledge. Infinite as the sky. Jesus attained to that and became the Christ. I'm not restoring my chat, but those of you who have kept the chat on, you can look at the names and say, you can become a prophet if you can have this Dharma Meg Samadhi. Have Dharma Meg Samadhi and you will be a prophet. Then you will not be worshipping Buddha, you will not be worshipping Christ. People will be worshipping you. Knowledge becoming infinite, the knowable becomes small. Actually, it's a slightly difficult thing to understand. Here is this pen. Pen is the knowable. If we want to know the pen, we say, where is the pen? It's a nice pen. It's not a good pen. Pen is knowable. It belongs to Prakriti. However, as we mentioned, this is limited. If you remove this limitedness, that means this pen and this penness has to go away. If this pen and this penness goes away, then what will remain? Pure existence. Absolutely pure existence, which is Brahman or Atman or whatever name you use. Slightly, this concept is slightly subtle. It's not difficult. Actually, it's very subtle. Because this pen creates two kinds of ideas in our mind. One is pen, and there is existence. Go back to pen, it becomes penness, pure pen, from which every other pen has evolved. And there is pure existence. Take away this pen. From this existence, what remains? Pure existence. That is pure knowledge. So knowledge and knowable, these are two different things. Here we have this pen. Here we have this pen. I know this pen. So three things are involved. I know this pen. When the knowledge becomes infinite, when all coverings are gone, the pen does not exist. What remains? Pure knowledge. I also goes away. Naturally, I cannot remain there because there is no limit on that I anymore. So subject, the object, and the process of knowing, all three become one. It's a very simple thing. The argument is very simple. And just that when people say that it's so difficult to understand, I wonder why they find it so difficult. It's a very simple thing. This pen represents existence. Remove this pen. Through your knowledge, what remains? Only pure existence. That means object is gone. Only knowledge remains, the pure knowledge, infinite knowledge. Subject is also gone because subject is also a product of knowledge. Subject is gone. So what remains? Only knowledge. This is known as Gyata, Geya, Gyan. These three become one. Gyata is the knower and Geya is the knowable, only knowledge remains. That is the goal of all spirituality. The three, subject, object, and verb, three have to become one, pure knowledge. Once it becomes pure knowledge, this is Satchidananda. This is what is known as Satchidananda. Pure Chaitanya, pure consciousness. This is what yoga has been discussing. This is what Vedanta also discusses. You don't have to merge them. This is something very obvious. Once you remove the limits, what remains is infinite. Because the limit has gone away from the object and limit has gone away from the subject too. So what will remain? The infinite knowledge. Only knowledge remains. That is when you say, Aham Brahmasmi. That is when you say, I am that Atman. Now, ordinary man thinks himself very small because to him the knowable seems to be infinite. This world, this universe seems so huge, so infinite. Where there's a knowable. We think, supposing here we had a very expensive pen. We will say it's so expensive, oh my God, I can't afford it. But why? Because you think you are small. In this universe, we think we are small. That is why this universe appears so big, so huge. Something like infinite, bordering infinite. But once you are established in that knowledge, then you realize that the entire universe has become like speck of dust before you. Right now, these are very popular things. There is this huge universe, and there is this Milky Way, and there is a small star. And that small star, we have the sun. We have this earth. In earth, we are such like a speck. So why do we feel so proud of ourselves? Is there any reason? If this be the truth, this is not the truth. The truth is that this entire universe, all this with all these galaxies and clusters and stars, are just like a small speck in front of me. Put a telescope and see from the wrong side of the telescope. There is the eyepiece and there is that objective. If you see from the opposite side, things will become smaller. You are looking from the wrong side, so you appear very small. But see from the right side, then you will see that, oh my God, actually you are huge. We are magnifying the universe. Actually, universe is very, very small compared to us. The knowledge that limits knowledge now appears as objects and as huge. That is where the problem lies. We are awed. We are simply awed by things that we come across. But once you have this discriminative power, once you have reached that level, you know that it's nothing, it's just a big zero, big fat zero. Tata kritarthanam parinam krama samaptir gunanam. Then are finished the successive transformation of the qualities they having attained the end. These are successive. One thing moves to another thing moves to another. We will explain it. Kshana pratiyogi parinama parant nigraya kramaha. The change that exists in relation to moments and which are perceived at the other end, they all cease. See, actually what happens, think of this way. Let's go back to the example of a movie. There's a projector and the reel is moving. Because the things are moving, the ultimate result that we get is of a moving picture, known as movies. We still call them movies. Although the process have changed completely. Because The perception is changing every second, every kshana, every second. So we feel this transformation. And because we feel the transformation, we are awed by it. But for a yogi, the whole thing comes as one solid picture. Uh, we can have two simple examples. Take up a book. Think of a story or a book that you read maybe when you were in class 3 or class 4. Let's say some small story book. When a child reads that book, she has to struggle through every word, every sentence, and every page. You have read it. You see the entire story as one single picture. And when you see that baby struggling, you say, "Oh, good, you are studying very good." Knowledge is coming to that baby through every word, through every sentence. But because you have studied it, you get the complete picture. Exactly, there's a difference between me and, say, Jesus. I am seeing this world as continuous succession of transformation from one word to another. And these persons who had dharma make samadhi, they see the entire thing as a one solid picture. Or think of a huge board, just a big board. There's a huge picture. And there are blinkers on your face. And there's a small pinhole through which you are seeing the thing. You can move only in one direction. So you see picture after picture, and there is transformation. And you try to find a meaning of it. When you have done yoga sadhana, when you have reached that level of discrimination, the blinkers are removed completely and you see the entire picture one go. So what will happen? There will be no transformation. And because there is no transformation, there will be no time. This is a phenomenal thing. You see, it's so difficult to understand. Time stops. Time loses its meaning completely. Time loses meaning forever. Time stops forever. For any of the spiritual persons, time stops for time. Time loses its meaning. Because time is a manufacture of the mind. Time and mind, these are related. If there is mind, there is time. If there is time, there is mind. You have transcended mind. You're seeing the entire picture now. When I first got this example in my mind, I worked it out myself. It was Lord's grace that this came, that actually it's like this. Think of a huge picture and just blinkers. You have one small pinhole and you are forced to go through it. You cannot go backward. Because you cannot go backward, you just remember the little that you can. And you keep on moving forward. Frame by frame, word by word. You're trying to make some meaning out of it and you keep on asking, what's the meaning in life? Why do we live? What's the purpose of my life? The purpose of your life is to get rid of these blinkers. When you get rid of these blinkers, then you will see there is neither life, there is neither nor time, nor there is any purpose. The problem is not there, problem is here. Get rid of this. Swami says, mind that has realized the omnipresence, there is no succession. There can be no succession. How can there be succession? You are seeing the entire picture. Or those of you might have seen a movie, particularly a very boring movie, extremely boring movie. And some friend says, come, let's go watch that movie again. You'll say, I know. But you know the entire picture now. And one who goes to enjoy, he will be seeing frame by frame. You have seen the entire picture. Now, these are not something theoretical speculation. These are the truth. Everything has become present for it. Now, this is a very important statement. Everything is now present for you. There is no past, there is no future, because you're seeing the entire picture. The past and future are all. This is very, very important thing about spiritual realization. It's not about yoga, it's about every spiritual realization. Time stands controlled. All knowledge is there in 1 second. Just imagine seeing the entire picture and seeing picture frame by frame. That's the difference. So, well, we then come to the last sutra. Purushat shunyanam gunanam prati prasava kaivalyam swarup pratisthava chiti shakte iti. This is the last sutra, fourth, 33. The resolution in the inverse order of the qualities bereft of any motive of action for the Purusha is Kaivalya. Kaivalya is that state where there is no more motive, nothing. Everything has been resolved back. Or it is the establishment of the power of knowledge, its own true nature, its own nature. When you are establishing your own nature, there is pure knowledge. There is no limit on that knowledge. Because if you imagine knowledge as an ocean, you put limits. So one limit becomes this pen, another limit becomes this microphone. Sounds so strange, but that's the truth. So, well, that's it. And Swamiji has given such a beautiful end to this topic that whenever I take these classes, I like to read it aloud. Nature's task is done. This unselfish task, which our sweet nature had imposed upon herself. Nature had imposed upon herself that it will take you through these experiences. She gently took the self-forgetting soul by the hand, as it were, and showed him all the experiences in the universe. Like in Tia, Hans is taking Tia through different experiences. All manifestations bringing him higher and higher through various bodies. You have reached the human bodies. Great advantage. Because now we can experience the world. We can also know about God. Sri Ramakrishna says the elephant is such a huge elephant, but you cannot contemplate on God. Till his lost glory came back and he remembered his own nature. Sometimes you might have seen in movies somebody who has lost memory. He's shown series of pictures and all. Do you remember this? Do you remember that? And suddenly, oh, it's me. Then the kind mother went back the same way she came for others who also have lost their way. This is actually from commentary. This is not from Patanjali. Now, Patanjali will not be talking in such poetic way and in such humble way with devotion there. Then the kind mother went. Now, for Patanjali, Prakriti is never mother because Prakriti is inert and independent. But Swamiji quotes it from partly from the commentaries and partly these are his own words. Because see, in today's spiritual world, we have Vedanta and Bhakti and Yoga all coming on a single platform. So Prakriti is no more inert. Prakriti is alive. Because whether it is inert or not, how does it matter? We know that God alone has become Prakriti. God alone is working here through various means and as soul. So she's like mother. It's only in the last this sutra that Swamiji is treating Prakriti as mother. Well, also in the trackless desert of the, and thus is she working without beginning and without end. And thus through pleasure and pain, through good and evil, the infinite river of souls is flowing into the ocean of perfection of self-realization, self-explanatory. Glory unto those who have realized their own nature. May their blessings be on us all. Those who realize their nature by reaching that ocean of perfection. May their blessings be on us. So that's the beautiful Raj Yoga is now completed, and we intend to take up Mandukya Karika after this, which is pure Vedanta. So, dear listeners, those of you who have listened to our live talks, thank you so much. You have been such a great encouragement for us, such a great source of support. And those of you who have been listening to our talks, you will find that usually we get around 1,000, 1,500 views. That's good. I mean, so many people are interested, and our talks are a bit on the serious side. We don't expect many people to listen to these talks. Thank you all, and my prayers at the feet of Sri Ramakrishna and all the other masters. May we slowly start progressing on the path of spirituality. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Hari Om Tat Sat. Shri Ram Krishna Arpanamastu.